Hello, Comp 1. Good afternoon to you. I'd like to introduce you to my North Star 30-ton log splitter. North Star 30-ton log splitter, composition 1. You know, a couple days ago in one of my face-to-face classes, a class I'm really enjoying, my 8 o'clock classical mythology class, I was getting the day going. It's about 10 to 8. The students were coming in, enjoying each other's company, and I was getting the computer going and getting all my gear out to teach, the books and the lesson plan and so forth. And I have to confess, because I'm a chronic eavesdropper, I was listening to their conversations a little bit absent-mindedly. My attention was drawn to the conversation of a young man that I enjoy. His name is Mark. He's kind of off to the right there. The seats are tiered. And I heard him complaining in kind of a good-naturedly way to a friend of his that was sitting nearby him. And he was saying things along these lines. And he was talking about school, life at Central Lakes College. I recall him saying, when are we ever going to make an outline again? When else in our lives are we going to be asked to create an annotated bibliography? When else are we going to need to craft a works consulted page with the sources in alphabetical order and so forth? And, as someone who's been teaching for many years, I really understood that young man. I really do. Well, I got a little nervous, I thought, hey, is this class going to feel like that? A class in which we sort of make lighthearted presentations on the gods and monsters that we dreamed into being before, with fake names and fake powers, kind of a cooperative group adventure. Would it feel like that? And we have to admit, there's certain things in school that we know we're never going to do again. But I would argue that argumentation is not one of those things. The ability to be persuasive, the ability to persuade other people in moments big and small, in terms of importance, is something that you need to do. So I feel really confident about the importance of essay number 2, the persuasive essay in this course, Composition 1, Section 74. And will you ever be asked to write a persuasive essay again? No. The supervisor that comes to your office or wherever you are in your future workplaces, your future jobs, probably isn't going to come and say, I'd like a persuasive essay by 5 o'clock. But you are going to do things and gain practice in that faculty, in the writing of that paper. There's a couple things I'd like to talk to you about today to help you help ensure that your paper is as good as it possibly can be. I'd like to talk to you a little bit today and communicate some things to you about a composition theory called topical specificity. There's a definite relationship between how specific your topic is and how the quality of your final product. And there's a little bit of a study I'd like to talk about that was done way back in the 80s, whose research findings I think are still true. Things don't change in writing. Decade after decade, century after century, it's pretty much the same thing that rhetoricians traffic in. I'd also like to make some larger comments about what kind of situation we find ourselves as rhetoricians here in the 21st century. It has never been easier to make arguments. Years ago, you only had a few people listening to you, maybe however many people you could fit into a public square, for instance. But with this technology that's in our lives, every one of you has an everyday opportunity to make arguments that an awful lot of people can hear with the tap of a button. And we should talk about the responsibility of that just a little bit. But it's kind of loud around here. I can't exactly teach while I'm splitting wood. Let's go someplace peaceful where we can think and wonder together. Let's go fishing. I've got 2 topics today, principally. And I'll repeat the idea in the first one and we'll get it floating on the snow here. I want to talk to you a little bit about topical specificity. And that's just a fancy word for how big or how small your topic is. Now, it's kind of that time of the year, of the school year, where in all my classes I'm walking in and saying, have we already talked about this? And the same thing is happening with these videos, We're up over 40, and I know we've breached this subject a little bit, but I want to delve in a little bit more deeply into the topic today. Now, the persuasive paper, paper number 2, in many senses, is no different than the A to Z essay. With the A to Z essay, you picked your own topic. With the persuasive paper, I'm not giving you a topic. I'm giving you a modality, a mode to write in. I'm saying make an argument, make a claim, and then back it up. If I give you the topic, well, then it becomes my paper. I become responsible for it. Now, as you move through school, whether you go for just a year or two at CLC, Central Lakes College, or if you transfer to a four-year school or even go on to grad school, most of the time you are going to have to be vigilantly attentive to the invention and the creation of your own topic. And I'm telling you something you already know. If the topic is too big, you're simply going to be frustrated. If the topic is too small or too specific, you're going to run out of things to say by the second or third paragraph. And I can prove this by pointing to a little bit of research. I remember reading an account of a project that was done by this guy named Gordon Brazell. And I know it's a while ago, 1988, 89. But this was his question. His question was, is there a relationship between the quality of an essay and how specific the topic is? He conducted a survey, a kind of research project. He found several hundred students in a California school district, and he gave them 3 different types of topics and then studied very carefully what the products were like when they were done. To one group of students, he gave them absolutely minimal topical specificity, next to nothing. They were the kind of topics that I loved getting in the 70s. You'd walk into an English class and your English teacher would say, write about the green light in The Great Gatsby at the end of Daisy's Dock. One sentence. The next group, he gave moderate topical specificity. He maybe gave them a sheet with a couple of paragraphs, enough to get them going, enough information and context to orient them in the project. And then he took another group and he gave them what Brazell termed maximum topical specificity. They got a full sheet of paper that pretty much laid out exactly what they were supposed to do in terms of invention, arrangement, etc. And it's kind of like that little bear thing. In the end, he found out that the very best essays, the longest ones, the most developed essays, the most creative essays, really came from that middle group. The middle group that had just enough information to get going, but not too much. He found out that only the brightest and most divergently thinking students in that group could handle the first one, minimal topical specificity. And he found out, not too surprisingly, that the worst of all essays came out of the group that got the maximum topical specificity. They probably felt that the paper was already half written by the time they got to the bottom of the assignment sheet. Those essays were not only the worst, they were the briefest. Now what you've got to do with all of your essay topics, from here to the end of your school career, is really take a look at them and interrogate them and say, okay, I'm supposed to write an 800-word essay. Is this topic about right? My neighbor's dog barking. Is this topic size-wise, specificity-wise, about right for this amount of discourse? Later on up the line, you might write a research paper. The same question will be before you then. You're going to have to decide, can I accommodate this topic? Can I do it justice in the breadth of just a few words, whether it's a couple pages or 12 pages or 30 pages? If I could, I'd like to repeat some thinking that I modeled in my classroom this very week at Central Lakes College. I have a couple of wonderful sections of Composition 2. One meets at 10, one meets at 11. And I'd be happy to see you in my Comp 2s next year if you have an interest in continuing to work with me. But with Comp 2 at Central Lakes College, our dean gives us the academic freedom to either have a theme or not have a theme. And I've got to have a theme to hold it together. So the theme I chose for this particular spring for my Comp 2s was America Between the Wars, 1919 to 1939. And we are reading literature and philosophy and studying history and listening to the music of that era. We're just kind of inhabiting this 20-year period. And the only constraint, although I'd rather call it an invitation, is that the students have to write about something within that 20-year breadth of time. Now I'm thinking specifically of a student named Anita, who has given me permission to talk and gave me permission this week to talk about the process and the project that she's going through. So she starts out about a month ago. I remember sitting down with her in the hall way at Central Lakes College, and she's an older student, and she said, I'm interested in the Holocaust. I'd like to write something about the Holocaust. And I said, well, you know, that's kind of outside our time frame in terms of the thematic concerns of the course. But is there a way that we can write about and wonder about the things in Germany that led up to the Holocaust? Now, you can see up front, as Comp 1 students or Comp 2 students, whoever you are, that you're not going to be able to accommodate the Holocaust as a topic in the breadth of just a few pages. 12 pages is nothing. There are entire libraries, particularly at St. Cloud State, that are filled with books and documentation and articles and just all sorts of eyewitness accounts about the Holocaust. So that topic is huge. You can make the same mistake with this persuasive paper. So we start to wondering, and we've got those 5 W's, you know, that you learned about when you were a kid. Her first question is, why? Why in the world were 6 million people, at least 6 million people, executed in those gas chambers, in those terrible concentration camps in Germany? Not just Jews, people who were gay, people who were Polish, people who were Catholic, all kinds of people died in those camps. Well, you know, we discussed this and we decided that one of the first things that you've got to do if you're going to kill a whole bunch of people is not think of them as people. You have got to find words that sign and signify who they are, right? So you're going to say, well, you're not a human being, you're a Jew. And in the saying of that, you're objectified, your humanity is taken away, and I'm halfway up the road for having a rationale for killing you. I think we've discussed this before. No dictator says, I'm going to kill a whole bunch of people in Kurdistan. I'm going to, as Saddam Hussein did in 1988, I'm going to enact an ethnic cleansing, and I'm going to kill 70,000 Kurds with a terrible poisonous gas. So then, once we get past the why did they do that? Why did that happen? Why there? Why Rwanda? Why Serbia? Well, then we run into some very interesting questions as we get increasingly specific as we head down that funnel regarding the how. What was the method? I love the word method. It comes from 2 Greek words, met meaning along, and hod coming from hodos. So when we ask about the method, we're wondering, how did they do that? How did they do that? What was the way? What was the route that they chose? We also decided in talking, moving through that tunnel, getting ever more specific, that was certainly an act of persuasion. If you're going to kill millions of people, you have to persuade thousands of people to be complicit in that and assent to it, because it takes an industry to murder that many human beings, our brothers and sisters, only 60, 70 years ago. Well, then once we went up that road, getting ever more specific, I know I keep repeating that, we began to ask ourselves, how were those people persuaded? And pretty quickly, we started remembering, she and I, that propaganda is very powerful. Marshall McLuhan taught me that anyone who wants to run a society or be a bureaucrat or a tyrant, they have to control the media, whatever decade they're in. And real quickly now, things are getting further down that funnel. We began to wonder, okay, what forms can propaganda take? What forms did propaganda take in pre-World War II Germany? We started listing them off. Well, they didn't have TV, but they had radio. They had pamphlets. They probably had opinion essays that occurred in editorials. Probably little bits went up before movies for German school children. So now we start out with this huge topic, genocide, and now we're moving through the funnel, and we're at the bottom, or further down the line anyway. And in the end, Anita started out with a huge topic that is completely insurmountable for a 12-page paper, and what she'll probably end up doing is analyzing artifacts of discourse in just one of those classified categories. She'll probably look at pamphlets, for instance, leaflets that were distributed in the streets of those German cities. That's still pretty big, but at least she's within striking range for something that is practical and can be accounted for in just a 12-page paper. Your mission is the same when you write this persuasive essay that's hopefully going to come home to roost next week in that Dropbox. If you have an interest in immigration reform, for instance, immigration is an issue in this country along our borders, that's fantastic. I really salute that. That's one of the burning issues of our time. What do we do in this country for all these people that want to come here and make it their home? Well, I'm glad that's your interest, but don't take immigration reform on in a 700-800 word persuasive paper. It's not going to work. You're not going to get anywhere. Maybe think about staying away from the burning social issues because all of them are too big. You can write a wonderfully persuasive paper about something small, and I'll let you decide what that is. I'd like to make one other comment too, and maybe I'm looking ahead to your Comp 2 days, because most people that take Comp 1 are going to go on and take Comp 2. Keep thinking of yourself as someone who has the power and the ability to generate knowledge. We've got to try to bust out of the model that school obsessively puts before us, right? Where you walk into a room and there's this teacher that's got the advanced degree, and it's pretty intimidating. They get to talk, you're sitting, they're standing, their desk is even bigger than yours. I think you should feel empowered and emboldened to think of yourself as someone that can generate and create knowledge. Don't be passive. It's the only thing that bothers me about the students here. In all my jobs I've had in recent years, from St. Cloud State to St. Ben's, where I still teach down the road, and up at Central Lakes College. Sit up, go for it. Push back against that idea that the teacher is the only authority in the room. You are an authority in the room too. Think the thought, raise your hand, create an idea. Be brave enough to do that, even if the idea is wrong. I'm thinking too, here in the 21st century, it has never been easier to be a persuasive person, to be influential, and to make arguments. For instance, I'm thinking of a month ago, just to give you a few examples. I'm reading along, I got a newspaper, and I'm sitting on my couch, and I saw something that made me go, kind of grumpy, And I thought, something I've thought of a million times. I'm going to write something about that. Years ago, only a few years ago, I'm not that old, I would have had to go find a piece of paper, put it in the typewriter, write out a letter to the editor of the newspaper I was thinking of. Then I'd have to find an envelope, find a stamp, drive out to the end of my long driveway, it's almost half a mile out to the highway, and put it in the mailbox. Well, right now, here in the year 2012, it took me 3 or 4 minutes. I logged on to the opinion section of that paper. I wrote up a quick little rant. I don't think it took me more than 5 or 6 minutes. The editor called me the next day and said, "Is this really you? Would you really like this to appear in the St. Cloud Times?" I said, "Absolutely. Thank you for printing it." It's that fast. You should think about yourselves as someone that can do the exact same thing. Go online. If you see something that you either like or dislike, everything's praise, blame, and rhetoric, put up a blog post on it. Maybe nobody will read you. Maybe 1,000 people will read you. Write letters to newspapers. Be brave. Get your thinking and your values and the things that you believe in out there. It's like what Borges says. We live and die in just a few lines, like characters in Shakespeare. You can, we all participate in the production of the world. I just probably telling you things you already know. I was also telling my students the other day that when I was a kid, we only got our news from basically a few sources, okay? I'm thinking back to the 60s and the early 70s. When I was a little boy, I remember walking to the end of our driveway to get the newspaper, and I was real interested in the Vietnam War, so I'd pick up the Minneapolis Star, which is what it was then. First thing I'd do is flip it up and see how many soldiers we lost the day before in Southeast Asia. It was called the KIA count, the killed in action. And I remember at 5 o'clock as a little boy, sitting down with my mom and dad and my sisters, and we watched Walter Cronkite, because if there was news in the world, he was where we got it. We trusted that guy. He was like everybody's grandpa. But if you didn't have a TV and access to those 3 news stations, you didn't have any news at all. And even if you did have a television and you watched, CBS, NBC, and ABC, that was pretty much where we got our news. 3 major news channels, newspapers, and maybe the radio, WCC Rural Radio if you grew up in Minnesota. Here in the 21st century, anyone can be a generator of knowledge. Anyone can be a journalist. Take a look at, and I know this kind of dates this video, and I'll probably just delete it if the world gets all peaceful or something a couple years from now, but just look at our brothers and sisters suffering on the other side of the planet. All these uprisings that have gone on in the last couple years in Tunisia, in Egypt, in Libya, in Iran and Iraq, and these days in Syria, where hundreds of people are dying every week. You know what? It's pretty tough for a journalist to get in there and tell us what's going on, tell us what's happening in that country. But anybody with a phone, man, anybody who's got an iPhone can take that phone out and be brave and record what's happening. This is a new development. Anyone can be a journalist that has a camera or a phone or an online connection. And I would call this, in the development of rhetoric's rich history, a very important thing to think about. I was just last week looking at some reports from this brave young man named Danny, who's in Syria and whose city, Homs, is just being pounded. And that guy is bravely putting up one YouTube video after another. You can do the same thing. Luckily, right now it's pretty peaceful. There's no bombs or rockets going on here. But if there were, we got a couple cameras and we could start documenting it right now. So these are the things that I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to talk to you about topical specificity, and I wanted to empower you and embolden you to think about yourself as a generator of knowledge, as someone who has the ability to make arguments. I've already seen you do it. I've been watching you do it for 5 or 6 weeks, and I'm awful glad that we've got a lot of this semester to go, and that I get to keep being your reader and watching you behave symbolically in the world of your journals, in the world of your posts and those discussions, and in the essays that we have yet to write. I'm near the end of this video, and I got to admit I'm pretty disappointed. This basset hound up here is doing exactly what I asked it to do. I wanted it to bark across this entire video for a kind of soundtrack. But I want you to know too, these videos are very carefully scripted, and the script called for a 2-pound crappie right now to come along and bite this minnow so I could pull it up and right now at the end of the video show you what a sportsman I am. And I'm really upset. Hey! You guys!